I'm Denise Tang. I am part of the research team along with Teju and others here. So I'm the moderator for tonight. So let me first introduce our esteemed speakers for the night here. So we have Su Hua, who is a lecturer at the School of Journalism and Communication in Beijing Language and Culture University. She received a MA in linguistics at Sichuan International Studies University and a PhD in communication studies at the University of Iowa. Her research interests revolved around the intersection of media technology, social interaction, interpersonal relationship, and social change. Her work has been published in both English and Chinese academic journals such as Media, Culture, and Society, Interaction, Studies in Communication and Culture, and Modern Communication. So for tonight's symposia, we will first have Sue speaking to us for around 20 to 25 minutes. Then Nimi will give also a presentation of 20 to 25 minutes, and then we'll have 30 minutes for Q&A. So while you're listening to our speakers speak, if you have any questions, you can either type it into our chat box, or later when we open for Q&A, you're most welcome to speak up as well. All right, so maybe I'll hand it over right now to Sue.
Let me share my screen with you. Thank you so much, Dennis, for the nice introduction. And it's a great pleasure to be able to speak here at the mini symposium and to communicate with my colleagues in Hong Kong and India about digital intimacy. And I really look forward for a nice discussion about the issues that we are all concerned about. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So I would love to start with an anecdote in my class several weeks ago. So I asked my undergraduate students to brainstorm with the phrase 网络恋情 or love online. They listed such words as fraud, cheating, fake voice, arranging sexual encounters, and hookup. And then I asked them to brainstorm with the phrase 网络交友 or making friends online. So they came up with much nicer words such as sincere, being yourself, sharing interests, and etc. So clearly they had better opinion about making friends online than seeking love online. And but then things get quite blurred when some students brought up a talk. Brought up a topic about the kind of transition between friendship to romantic love. And so there is and it's totally okay with my students, and that's totally fine if someone started as an online friend and then developed a romantic love, but not directly seeking love online. And that seems to me a very interesting anecdote that resonates with my own research. And it points to this idea of ambiguity in the kind of terms that people use. By people, I mean the young Chinese use when they talk about online dating. And so my topic today would be focusing on ambiguity and the usefulness of ambiguity for the young Chinese urban areas. No, that's not the here. Okay, here it is. So the anecdote raised the question about the cultural meanings of the terms we use to reference online dating, what we describe as online dating in English academic journals and news reports. And while we use online dating to reference a whole range of activities and purposes of dating, on dating sites and platforms, what is lost in the translingual practice of discussing online dating? So in fact, in this anecdote also resonates with my a puzzle in my own research. I interviewed 20, actually more than 20 young Chinese women. But then later on, I decided to just focus on the younger ones. I interviewed about 20 young Chinese women about their online dating experiences in 2018, 2019, and 2021. what struck me first and puzzled me for a long time was that the young women I interviewed all expressed in one way or the other a distaste for being too purposive in online dating, even though they were actually actively seeking a boyfriend or girlfriend or hookup or whatever other forms of intimacy. And it strikes me as not only a euphemism for seeking love. I think there's more to it. And it makes me wonder why a lot of the research literature has been criticizing specific dating media or online dating in general as encouraging cold, rational, and calculating partner selection practices. But my research participants were telling me that their online dating experiences were not rationally planned and are purposefully executed. Clearly, I think that there's something missing in accounting for the lived experiences of these online daters. So my research, so my participants were mostly college students and graduate students, and one businesswoman in her early 30s, but mostly in her 20s. Sexuality, I have a mix of demographic mix there, mostly heterosexual, but bisexual and homosexual and pansexual. And then 4 cities, Beijing, Kunming, Zhenjiang, Chongqing, and 5, and Qingdao. And about the media that use, there's a variety, there's a whole range of dating media that they use, which is quite different from a lot of the approaches that I've seen to online dating, mostly focusing 1 or 2 or just several media sites. And for me, this is also a good opportunity for me to see how they choose their media and what meanings they attribute to their media preferences. So the question I pose, I'm actually taking a pragmatist approach to this question. Why do my participants say that you cannot be too purposive in online dating? So I try to find that the conditions that make this surprising fact a matter of course. And in other words, I try to find out how they understand dating online and why is ambiguity, being unpurposive, or not, at least not too purposive, so important to them. And what are the sociological conditions that make their preference of ambiguity reasonable? And so these are my research questions. And one way, actually a quick way to understand the meaningful ambiguity is to examine how the word making friends is used in relation to other terms. And one such word is 相亲, right? It's arranged blind dates as potential marital partners. There's a very clear orientation to marriage. And the other one is 约炮, arranging sexual encounters, usually with no relational expectations or expectations of emotional involvement there. So these local terms are often congregated into the umbrella term of online dating in previous research. But in the narratives of my participants, the purposive searching of a marital or sexual partner is likely to impede the romantic prospect of online dating. And if an intent to look to hook up discourages emotional attachment and instrumentalized sex, as they would believe, a marital orientation entails pragmatic considerations, including wealth and a family background. So making friends both suggest, in contrast, both suggest an openness to relational possibilities and implies a relative freedom from pragmatic and instrumental concerns, hence leaving more space for love. So it became clear to me that I'm actually dealing with a cultural form of courtship that's preferred by my participants, the young urban women. And ambiguity is a meaningful part. It's very meaningful to this form in that it implicates their ideals of love and ideals of self. And the ideal of love is mostly related to this kind of understanding that love is pure and uncontaminated by practical and instrumental concerns. So here I'm giving this example of Lily, one of my participants. She was in her fourth year in college when I interviewed her, and she was very anxious about failing to find a boyfriend after multiple attempts. And so I was thinking that probably she was afraid of becoming a leftover woman. It's a label that's frequently attached to a single women in their late 20s or beyond. But she said, no, I'm not worried about marriage. I'm worried about not being able to experience pure love. And she thought that she longed to experience this pure and simple love that's in typically college style before settling down for marriage. And so that strikes me that love for her, as well as for many other participants of mine, that love was regarded as a separate ideal from practical concerns, marriage, or other practical arrangement of family. The desire for pure love, I sometimes expressed through their media preferences. Media that are not intended primarily or ostentatiously for dating online, ironically offered more romantic potentials for them. For example, literature website discussion boards, right, and online games, different kinds of online games, music sharing sites, language cosplay, and other online venues where the users can share interests and interact playfully. So for the young, well-educated women, the hybrid media form fits well with the romantic ideology of pure love. And compared with the explicitly designed media, dating media, the hybrid, what I would call hybrid dating media, enable them to invoke a discourse of love that's natural, spontaneous, and authentic. This is one example from my participant, and she met her boyfriend on an online game. She thought that in the gaming space, love is purer, simpler, and more sincere, unlike the real world where people think about their relationships as a pretty temporary or instrumental, and not really putting their real heart to it. So I want to argue that this emphasis on pure love is a response to the increasing instrumentalization of intimacy in the Chinese society. First of all, economic prospects have become an important concern in women's choosing of marital partners. And this is because the family has become a major welfare provider for old age as well as childcare, because the state fails to provide adequate welfare to everyone. And meanwhile, upward social mobility become increasingly difficult in the fierce competition of market economy, and there's a fear of downward mobility. And together with this tradition of hypergamy, the economic concerns become a very important aspect in marriage considerations. So the heterosexual ideal of love marriage in modern China is thus challenged by what some scholars call steely intimacy, meaning more than cold, right? Intimacy, with love becoming a separate ideal from the compulsory marriage or other practical family arrangement in order to support old age or childcare. And for other participants, their own family of origin simply presented a good example of instrumentalized intimacy. For instance, one of my participants told me that she was so scared that her parents' attitude towards her would change drastically based on her grades that she earned in high school. And this is what she said. In my first year in high school, they always boasted about my academic excellence wherever they went. But when my grades went down in the second year, they completely negated my worth. They felt I was bad in grades and therefore weak in morality. So child rearing in Chinese middle-class families, according to some scholars' research like Meng Bingchun, was influenced by the neoliberal discourse of optimizing human resources for self-development and global competition. And to a large extent, education has become a way to add market values to children so as to give them advantage in a fierce competition. And I think that that's another reason for this perception of instrumentalized intimacy among some of my participants. And the third factor is that there is this concern about sexual exploitation. For many of my participants, sexual hunting more than marriage hunting involves instrumentalization of intimacy. And the sexual harassment and intimate control were widely publicized through Me Too movements and social media, and high-profile news stories about gaslighting romantic relationships. So the word PUA, or pickup artist, has entered into the everyday language of well-educated young women as a general term for interpersonal manipulation. Some of my participants also reported that there's a disparity of interest between them and their male dates. So when they treated, while they treated sex as an expression of affection, their male dates sometimes would just disappear after having sex with them, or after they refuse their sexual requests. So in a nutshell, I think that pure love as a romantic ideal was highly desirable for my participants precisely because that it's perceived to be extremely difficult to achieve in the current cultural trends. And in this context, the ambiguity of making friends with no instrumental purposes promises better chances of love. And that's one aspect of the ambiguity I want to talk about. The second aspect is has to do with how they chose their dates. So basically, when I ask my participants how they chose dates, they would give me the answer, good chats. Yeah, 聊得好. Good chats are their primary criterion. So compared to matching of family backgrounds and other external criteria, good conversation is personal and invokes a sense of romantic mysticism. But of course, good chats also implicate social positions. As one of my participants said, even though you don't ask each other about their backgrounds, if you come from different backgrounds, there won't be a good conversation. So, but good chat. So there's this reflection and understanding of chats and the implication of social positions in good conversations. So for the participants, good chats often take place in conversations with individuals of good quality or 素质. This good quality or these good qualities often include, for example, artistic tastes, media literacy, good education, knowledge about international politics and civility and online and offline interaction, among others. So for the young participants, quality is a composite measure of personal and social attributes, and social compatibility is already implicated in the personal chats. I want to say that some quality has been a topic that's been talked about in a lot of literature, and some researchers argue that popular discourses of quality in the Chinese society has a strong neoliberal edge, in that the personal qualities are analyzed and understood as a human resources, tapped on for happy relationships like they are for successful enterprises. But other researchers trace it back to traditional values of a marital match, where you find men's educational and socioeconomic positions are equal, at least, and preferably superior to those of women. But and sadly, this is also how a lot of the recent dating platforms operationalize 素质, right? And they will look at where you graduate, like, prestigious universities or just a normal, ordinary 4-year college or 3-year college. But I believe that there is a gender, in the context of online dating, there's a very important gender component to 素质. And this is one of the examples that illustrate this gender component. Right? One of the participants said that, I feel the way he spoke revealed the way he thought. Judging from his way of speaking, his level of education was not very high. He was probably expecting some pretty girl with the plastic face of some internet celebrity wearing heavy makeup. Now, this is a response to, this is a comment on the male, the man who's matched up to her on one dating website, dating platform, 1 week CP. So the first time the man greeted her was to address her as a beauty, and she was offended, and she was offended, and she expressed very strong dislike of that. And clearly this man didn't understand the gender politics as this middle-class woman understands it. So there's this gender component, but there's some other cases, but I will just save it for later and more complex. And if you have questions about the intersection between class, gender, and nationality, perhaps we will talk about that later in our discussion section. And I want to talk about the third aspect of ambiguity. Third aspect of the ambiguity, as it has to do with the reflection, the participants' reflection on their online experiences. I'll be faster here. So the young women online daters often describe their online dating experiences as a learning process. And for them, meeting strangers offered bountiful learning opportunities and chances for personal growth. Such as, they get to be exposed to diverse personalities, values, lifestyles, knowledge about social others that actually help them to reflect upon and redefine their self. And treating online dating experiences as learning experiences help them to construct an agentic self, which reminds me of the neoliberal ethos of entrepreneurial self, that in which self is constantly monitored as a collection of skills, assets, qualities, experiences, and alliances. But the question is, what do the young women do with their experiences? If there are better selves or agentic selves, are there better chances of intimacy? So I want to talk about three possibilities that I observed in my data. One is negotiation and alignment. So that's where parties ended up with a happy romantic relationship and try to carry it on and even plan to start a life together. And that's where love is no longer separate from practical concerns. So they try to make arrangements about studying abroad together, or finding jobs together, or moving to the other person's city, living together. And in some other cases, participants align their fun-seeking sexual activities with more traditionally defined relationships, right? They would have explore sexuality in a more stable relationship that the mainstream culture defined. And the second,
you have 3 more minutes.
Okay.
3 more minutes. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wrap up. So the second possibility is the conflict and delay. So that's where what the participants have learned are not able to be practiced in their current relationships, but may be useful in the future. For example, when they expanded their understanding of sexuality, but they are unable to negotiate that with their unchanged partner. And that's an example. And a third opportunity is deconstructing love and returning to the self. It's interesting that some participants found that they totally used their own word, deconstructed the traditional ideals of romantic love, like true love as the permanent bond between two people. But they ended up returning to the self. For example, regarding love as experience of self. So when they start a relationship, it's all about their own pleasure of love rather than the other person. Or they would turn to career to pursue another area of self-achievement. So to wrap up, what do I make of the usefulness of ambiguity? I think that online dating is hard to do when love is thought as separate from practical concerns, but a good match still involves social compatibility in the current socioeconomic context. And when the search for personal growth contradicts with the normative gender relations and expectations of the other party. So ambiguity is actually useful for holding all the contradictory aspirations and impossible challenges together. And I will just stop there. Thank you for listening.